remnants of Hurricane Derby. Shalom! First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakal Kadosh. Noble honors the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who are teaching this truth with sincerity, and a shout out to Akim out there on the four corners of the earth proclaim this truth. Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakal Kadosh, Barak Tum, Salakia for the video that got delayed or just didn't play on YouTube, but there was some copyright issue over the faggot Olympics, because that's all it was faggot shit. It was in a Richie from Boston video which I was looking at, and you know the Olympics is all copyrighted, you know, so had to get that part of it removed so it could play on YouTube. But nonetheless, though, remnants of Hurricane Derby threaten the northeast with flooding and possible tornadoes. The remnants of Derby raced northward on Friday, picking up speed with lashing rain, flash flooding, and the threat of tornadoes, on causing at least 8 deaths over the multi-day path up to the east coast. Some of the heaviest flooding was expected from New York's Adirondack Mountains across New England states, including Vermont, which is recovering from previous flooding. There was an increased threat of tornadoes and flooding among the path, including the I-95 corridor. You know, I-95 the other night, somebody nearly cut them off the road. You know, that asshole. Inside joke. There will be multiple threats in Derby's final chapter, and it's a dangerous one, POTUS said. Vermont governor warned of serious damage in the state, including already drenched parts of Vermont that were hit by flash flooding twice last month. So, you know, and of course remnants of Hurricane Burial. President Biden approved Vermont's emergency declaration, you know, because everything's you know, state of emergency, right? Derby was downgraded to tropical depression late Thursday afternoon and was post-tropical cyclone on Friday. National Hurricane said it made landfall early Monday on the Gulf coast of Florida's Category 1 hurricane. Then Derby made a second landfall early Thursday in South Carolina as a tropical storm. So, like everything else, this continues, and you still got the park fire going on in California. So, yeah, the Most High is not lag when it comes to his judgments. Now, we all know that this was a false flag, and nonetheless, though, you see who they're blaming. They're blaming the boogeyman, ISIS, right? Islamist terrorists, or Islamist teenagers, planned bloodbath at Taylor Swift concert. The Islamic State terror organization, which is really the Israelis, you know, because the Israelis, you know, want you to join their cause, so, you know, make you think you're fighting terrorists, and that Hamas is the sponsor of terrorism, as well as Iran. You know, ultimately they want their war with Iran. Australian authorities say, so this was planned by Islamic terrorists. 19-year-old man arrested in Vienna on Wednesday been planning suicide attack at Taylor Swift concert in the Australian capital, intelligence services announced on Thursday. He had intended to carry out an attack using explosives and knives. His aim was to kill himself and a large number of people during the concert. I guess they're going to say it was a jihad, right? You know, like Jihad John, the American the Islamic terrorist, even though John is a U.S. terrorist asset, because that's what ISIS is U.S. terrorist assets, Israeli assets. Ukraine taking heavy losses in Kursk. Kiev had nearly lost 1,000 soldiers and over 100 armored vehicles over the past several days, Russian Defense Ministry said. So in other words, yeah, okay, they did enter into Russia, but they got defeated by Russia. Russian forces continue to inflict heavy losses on Ukraine troops that crossed into the Kursk region earlier this week. Defense Ministry of Moscow reported on Friday, providing an estimate of Kiev's casualties in the incursion. According to the ministry, Ukraine lost 945 soldiers as well as 102 armored vehicles, including 12 tanks, 17 armored personnel carriers. The figure included more than 280 troops and 287 armored vehicles destroyed over the past 24 hours. So, yeah. And you'll see bigger, heavier losses as of course, like everything else, the war is going to continue to be funded. Pentagon refuses to rule out strikes on Moscow in shocking exchange on Ukraine's incursion into Kursk. Pentagon on Thursday was asked by a reporter during the daily briefing whether Ukraine could use American weapons in its ongoing Kursk incursion is consistent with U.S. policy, what Ukraine can use and cannot do with U.S. weapons. It became unclear that Ukraine troops are currently using American weapons to attack Russian territory, troops, civilian infrastructure. So like everything else though, they just sort of refuse to comment on that because of course they don't want to say, oh yeah, go ahead, attack Moscow, but they're not going to say that they can't. So we'll play that a little.
Can you provide us an update on Ukraine's incursion into Kursk? Is that consistent with, is that consistent with the United States' sort of understanding of what Ukraine can and cannot do with U.S. weapons?
Thanks for the question. So yes, it is. It is consistent with our policy, and we have supported Ukraine from the very beginning to defend themselves against attacks that are coming across the border and for the need for crossfire.
It's okay for them to invade another country.
So they are taking actions to protect themselves from attacks that are coming from a region that are within the U.S. policy of where they can operate, our weapons, our systems, our capabilities. In terms of this actual operation that's ongoing in the Kursk region that you've referenced, I prefer you to the Ukrainians to speak more to that. We are getting more information, but really it's for them to speak to their own operations.
So is the policy then essentially wherever they see an attack emanating from or a grouping of troops, so could that include like Moscow as well, if they saw some sort of preparation for them to then go into Moscow? Is that
would, again, we don't support long-range attacks into Russia. These are more for crossfire. I'm not going to put a specific range on it, as you know. They are aware of the U.S. policy and what we are supportive of. I think you know from the very beginning, we are supportive of Ukraine and their success on the battlefield, but as the dynamics have shifted on the battlefield, they've been able to actually push the Russians back further into Russian territory. But as they see attacks coming across the border, they have to be able to have the capabilities to respond.
So there you have it. That's giving them the okay to go into Moscow right there, by their own admittance. And like everything else though, you've got this going on with the fall of Bangladesh. Now they did swear in a new leader and all that, after the retirement, but serious crisis brewing on India's doorstep, and the West has every bit of role in it. Washington strategically pressured Hasina, fully aware that her potential successors might be less democratic and have stronger Islamist ties. Okay, here we go, bringing Muslims again, right? Because that's where the blame game is, even though the Israeli state is the one that started this fucking war. But who's getting the blame? Oh yeah, that's right, Islamist terrorists. That's the narrative. The Islamic terrorists, not the Israeli terrorists, the Islamic terrorists are doing all this shit, right? Forced ouster of Bangladesh Prime Minister from power by street agitators earlier this week. So guess who caused the incursions? The U.S. to overthrow its leader. Oh, just like they wanted to do in Syria, right? Bangladesh politics has been tumultuous, with Hasina's father, killed in 1975 in military coup along with all the members of his family, except Hasina and her sister, who happened to be abroad at that time. Since then, Bangladesh had a series of military coups until the resolution of civilian rule in 1991. However, failure to stabilize the country's politics of the unending rivalry between Hasina, Awami League, and Bijam Zia, the Bangladesh National Party. This has deeply polarized Bangladesh politics, making it virtually impossible for proper democratic process to function. So, like everything else though, you can see who's behind it. Of course the U.S. plays a heavy role, don't they always? Under the guise of fighting terror, under the guise of trying to be democratic, which means going and overthrowing other governments and installing governments that they deem as good governments, being the police of the world.
Canada and Australia have agreed to ramp up military cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, citing growing Chinese influence in the region.
China is pursuing the most ambitious military build-up of any nation since the Second World War, and it's looking to reshape the international system to advance its own interest.
The move comes after joint drills in the South China Sea that involved the US, Canada, Australia and the Philippines. Military chiefs of 4 countries vowed to uphold the right to freedom of navigation and overflight in the Asia-Pacific region. China has responded with patrols over the sea following the Western Allied exercises in the area. US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin previously called on Washington's allies in the Indo-Pacific to contain China. While following US, Australian defense and foreign policy chiefs meeting, Canberra agreed to produce US-guided missiles for Washington's allies in the Indo-Pacific. The Pentagon chief promised an increase in US troop numbers in Australia, while eyeing the Cocos Islands in the Asia-Pacific for a new military base set to counter China in the region. Meanwhile, a former Australian Prime Minister lashed out at the country's current leadership, saying it makes Australia fully dependent on Washington.
The Albanese government, with in their policy, is likely to turn Australia into the 51st state of the United States. I mean, Australia is quite capable of defending itself. We don't need to be basically a pair of shoes hanging out of the American backside.
Indonesian defense analyst and St. Petersburg University professor Koni Rahakundini Bakri says ASEAN countries must resist the spread of Western alliances in the Indo-Pacific.
Of course, this is going to bring the imbalance somehow, somewhere, because we have to remember...
An imbalance is what the U.S. causes.
Western countries allies was there. First is power defense arrangement. Second is AUKUS. The third one is the Quad that can possible change to become like a defense pact or something like that. So then we have to remember all the alliance of the United States, like France, like Germany, like Italy, they already make a quite strong military presence in the Asia Pacific. So this is going to bring the imbalance. And this is, I think, the moment that
exactly. Imbalance, just like you said.
Asia Pacific, including Indonesia, should realize that our sky is too high, but we keep flying too low. And therefore, the meeting of Prabowo and President Putin strategic talk days ago will be remaking the moments of 1960 when the vision of President Sukarno making us the strongest military capabilities in the Southern Hemisphere. This is actually to balance what the Australia with AUKUS, with the Quad and FTA countries develop now. So I think the US and our friends have to see this is going to escalate another problem if they keep doing this. And I like to underline because if from the point of China, Cocos Island is 2,000 kilometers from China. But for Indonesia, it's getting a stronger problem because it's only half of that. It's around 1,400 kilometers. So I think we have to understand this is not only about China issues, but about the region issue. Even though Australia and US building this
US and allies are escalating tensions within the whole region.
Asia Pacific, in the Pacific, we are going to have a problem with the spillover of the war.
So, like everything else, though, that's escalating as well. And like everything else, though, the IRGC releases footage of surveilling U.S. warships at the Strait of Hormuz. In other words, saying, oh, if you talk to the Israeli state, we're threatening you with these ships, right? But you know that Russia backs Iran on any response to the Israeli state. So, there we go. This is some of the surveillance from the IRGC showing you that, yeah, the U.S., of course, has entered the region. So, this is a war waiting to happen. And it will happen because Ezekiel 38 tells us that it does. But there's one more prophecy that has to come into play before World War III fully breaks out. Iran's crushing revenge, heroic resistance to expedite Israelis' annihilation, Quds Force Chief. Commander of the Quds Force of Islamic Revolution Guard Corps says Iran's harsh punishment of the Israeli regime for the assassination of Hamas political leader and anti-occupation struggle by the regional resistance front will speed up the Israeli regime's elimination. So, like everything else, Brigadier General made the remarks in a letter addressed to Yahya Sinwar, the new political bureau chief of the Palestinian resistance movement, on Friday. Ayatollah Saeed meeting to deliver harsh response to the Israeli regime and avenge the blood of the resistance leader. As it was stated by the leader of the Islamic Revolution, we consider it to be our duty to avenge his blood. Following the poignant incident that took place in the Islamic Republic, the commander said, there is no doubt the blood of the noble martyr will have an impact and severe punishment on the Zionist regime at the hands of the Islamic Republic, he said. So, it's just a matter of time. U.S. British conduct new aggression on Yemen's Al-Hodaya. So, United Kingdom with the U.S. have carried out new terror attacks against Yemen. Air aggression on the United States and United Kingdom carry out new attack on Yemeni province of Hodeidah on Friday dawn. United States and United Kingdom aggression have targeted Ras Isa area, the province, with three airstrikes without receiving information about casualties, the Yemeni Al-Milyas channel reported. So, like everything else though, even more pickup in Yemen. I have one more video here, but I'm not going to put it on this. If you want to watch the video, it's a good one. Say that you just wanted to stay on YouTube and don't want to look at it on Rumble or Odysee. But if you are on Odysee or Rumble, of course, and of course BitChute, then you can, the brother's channel is Gabar Ayash, and he does a really good lesson. But just to keep it brief on here, because like I said, I had to take out a segment of about maybe 12 or 14 seconds just to get the previous video to play over copyrights. Again, the Olympics, you can't even take still pictures of it, and talk about it on YouTube without it being blocked worldwide. So, got to be careful about that. Slovakia that I had to do that, but should be back on YouTube in the next few minutes or so. Like I said, I just found out about that not too long ago, that it was blocked. So, like everything else though, that's leading to this all-out war. But there's one more prophecy that has to take place before war can break out. But you can see all the players, are definitely gathering there in that valley. Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 5. Persia, Ethiopia, Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. And who's that? Who's going to be defending them? And that is that large army, as described in verse 4. All of them with all sorts of armor, even great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. And who is this nation that's going to supply that? Magog. Magog will be supplying them with all the means of weapons to survive. Gomer and all his bands, which is Turkey. See, Israeli state's been threatening to overthrow its leader Erdogan because of its stance against the Israeli state. The house of Togarmah, the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared, prepare thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. And that's what we're seeing play out. So like everything else though, have one more video here for the longer length version. So hopefully this has been edifying. For that I'm going to say Braka the Yahweh, Braka the Yahweh Shai, Shem Rakakadash, Wa Abal Babal. Brakathum, Jehovah elect. Shalom.